in ordinary society. All the possibilities are there, says the mother. All the activities are there. But in disorder and confusion, they are neither coordinated, nor centralized, nor unified around the central and unique truth and consciousness and will. So what should a Gnostic or spiritual community look like? Mother answers, it is certainly not an arbitrary construction of the type built by men, where everything is put pell-mell, without any order, without reality, and which is held together by only illusory ties. Then she gives the example of a religious community. She says, these ties are symbolized by the building of a monastery, an identity of clothing, an identity of activities, an identity even of movement. Everyone wears the same uniform, everyone gets up at the same time, everyone eats the same thing, everyone says his prayers together, etc. There is an overall identity. But naturally, on the inside, there remains the chaos of many disparate consciousnesses, each one following its own modes. For this kind of group identification, which extends right up to an identity of beliefs and dogma, is absolutely illusory. Yet, it is one of the most common types of human collectivity. To group together, band together, unite around a common ideal, a common action, a common realization, but in an absolutely artificial way. In the current state of Auroville, we can see that people have gathered around the ideal, but are totally divided in their consciousnesses, because most live still in the separative vital and mental ego. In contrast to this, Sri Aurobindo tells us that a true community, what he terms a Gnostic or supramental community, can be based only upon the inner realization of each one of its members, each realizing his real, concrete oneness and identity with all the other members of the community. That is, each one should not feel himself a member connected to all the others in an arbitrary way, but that all are one within himself. For each one, the others should be as much himself as his own body. Not in a mental and artificial way, but through a fact of consciousness, by an inner realization. And this means that before hoping to realize such a Gnostic collectivity, each one must first of all become, or at least start to become, a Gnostic being. There are, in almost all societies, three types of men. The first type is the man dominated by the body and driven by the life force, who is a slave of desire and interests, and lives in the vital ego. The second type is the man who is primarily intellectual, and who always tries to regulate his desires and interests by reason, and lives in the mental ego.
Hi, you must be Scarlet.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you.
Oh, here, take a seat.
The third type is the dominantly spiritual man, who is aware of the secret soul beyond the intellect, the mind, the life, and the body, and bases his life movement on self-knowledge. If the people ruled by the Spirit are few in number, disorganized or imperfect, then they make very little impact on society. Still, some progress they are able to effect have a hold on the society. However, their influence becomes strong only if they can organize the many, but the natural men are far greater in number. Therefore, if the spiritual change of which we have been speaking is to be effected, it must unite two conditions, which have to be simultaneously satisfied but are most difficult to bring together. There must be the individual and the individuals who are able to see, to develop, to recreate themselves in the image of the Spirit, and to communicate both their idea and its power to the mass. And there must be, at the same time, a mass, a society, a communal mind, or at least the constituents of a group body, the possibility of a group soul, which is capable of receiving and effectively assimilating, ready to follow and effectively arrive, not compelled by its own inherent deficiencies, its defect of preparation, to stop on the way or fall back before the decisive change is made. Such a simultaneity has never yet happened. That the combination must happen someday is a certainty. This quotation was read to the mother by a disciple, who asked her whether the time has come for the conditions laid by Aurobindo to be fulfilled. She answered, "This is exactly what Auroville is for." But Auroville is still far from fulfilling the necessary conditions. That is how life in Auroville should be organized, she says. But I doubt whether people are ready. The first thing that should be accepted and recognized by everyone is that the invisible and higher power, that is, the power which belongs to a plane of consciousness that is in the truth, that this power is capable of ordering material things in a way that is truer, happier, and better for everyone than any material power. The only thing that could be competent is the truth consciousness, which would choose instruments and express itself through a certain number of instruments. Those who have this consciousness may belong to any social class. It is not a privilege of birth, but the outcome of personal effort and development. It is the individuals who have attained a certain higher consciousness who have the right to govern, not others, regardless of their social class. This would be the true vision. That would be the true hierarchy, the hierarchy based on each one's power of consciousness. If there is no representative of the supreme consciousness, there could be instead, it could be tried, a government by a few, a small number set between 4 and 8, something like that, who have an intuitive intelligence. Intuitive is more important than intelligence, with an intuition that is manifested intellectually. This would be closer to the truth than the lowest level, socialism or communism. Everything in between has proved to be incompetent. Theocracy, aristocracy, democracy, and plutocracy. All those have been a complete failure. The other one, the socialist or communist government, is proving itself a failure as well.
Il faudrait que tous ceux qui participent à l'expérience soient absolument convaincus que la conscience la plus haute est le meilleur juge des choses les plus matérielles.
What has ruined India is this idea that the higher consciousness deals with higher things, and that lower things do not interest it at all, and that it understands nothing about them. That has been the ruin of India. Well, this error must be completely eradicated.
C'est la conscience la plus haute qui voit de la façon la plus claire et la plus vraie ce que doivent être les besoins de la chose la plus matérielle. Avec ça, on pourrait essayer un nouveau genre de gouvernement.
The true hierarchy is a hierarchy of surrender to the Supreme. It is not a hierarchy of superiority with regard to what is below, but with human understanding, human reason, human knowledge, one is unable to discern this hierarchy. Only the awakened soul can recognize another awakened soul. True wisdom comes only when the ego disappears, and the ego disappears only when you are ready to abandon yourself completely to the Supreme Lord, without any personal motive and without any expectation of profit, when you do it because you cannot do otherwise. So, the conditions to be an organizer, says the Mother. It is not to govern, it is to organize. Should be these: no more desires, no more preferences, no more attractions, no more repulsions. A perfect equality for all things. Sincerity, of course, but that goes without saying. And then, only those who are themselves in that condition can discern whether another is in it or not. Those given the responsibility should be people with a universal consciousness. Wherever there is a personal consciousness, it means someone incapable of governing. For human authority to be legitimately exercised over others, it must be enlightened, impartial, and unegoistic. He only who has a perfect sense of true justice can claim the right to be obeyed. When I say the wise should govern the world, I am not taking a political point of view, but a spiritual one. Whatever the social status of the men in power, they should receive their inspiration from those who have realized the truth and have no other will than that of the Supreme. To the question, what political organization do you want for Auroville? Mother replied, an amusing definition occurs to me, a divine anarchy. But the world will not understand. Men must become conscious of their psychic being and organize themselves spontaneously, without fixed rules and laws. That is the ideal. For this, one must be in contact with one's psychic being. One must be guided by it. And the ego's authority and influence must disappear. the attempt to govern life by an increasing light of thought, rather than allow the rough and imperfect actualities of life to govern and to limit the mind, is a distinct sign of advance in human progress. But the true turning point will come with the further step, which initiates the attempt to govern life by that of which thought itself is only a sign and an instrument, the soul, the inner being. That is the real, the profounder sense which we shall have to learn to attach to the idea of self-determination or self-governance as the effective principle of liberty. Submit exclusively to the divine truth, says the Mother, and it will govern life outside all human laws and governments. The problem is that, for most men, it is what they want that they label truth.
Les Aurovilliens doivent vouloir la vérité, quelle qu'elle soit.
As early as 1966, Mother spoke in the agenda. She said, "You know that scores of people have come for Auroville. Instead of working, they spend their time talking and chatting. Their whole mental ego is bubbling with excitement. All of them. And they send me letters. They have already begun discussing what the city's political situation will be, even before the first stone has been laid. And one of them is scandalized. He wrote to me yesterday, saying he couldn't take part in something that wasn't purely democratic. So I answered him this: Auroville must be at the service of the truth, beyond all social, political, and religious convictions. I told him many things, but above all, I insisted a lot on the fact that it would be better to build the city first, and that we would see afterwards. Because he told me that it was important for him that we should remain in the democratic system until something better has been found. I felt like answering him, "How do you know that something better hasn't been found?" But I did not say anything. A spiritualized society, says Sri Aurobindo, can alone bring about a reign of individual harmony and communal happiness. Or, in words which, though liable to abuse, are still the most expressive we can find, a new kind of theocracy, the kingdom of God upon earth. A theocracy which shall be the government of mankind by the divine in the hearts and minds of men. The true and full spiritual aim in society will regard man not as a mind, a life, and a body, but as a soul incarnated for a divine fulfillment upon earth. It will aim at establishing in society the true inner theocracy, not the false theocracy of a dominant church or priesthood, but that of the inner priest, prophet, and king. It will reveal to man the divinity in himself as the light, strength, beauty, good, delight, immortality that dwells within, and build up in his outer life also the kingdom of God, which is first discovered within us. It will show man the way to seek for the divine in every way of his being, and so find it and live in it, that however, even in all kinds of ways, he lives and acts, he shall live and act in that, in the divine, in the spirit, in the eternal reality of his being.